hazel, grass and root, herbs to heal us, plants to feed us, land to till and tend and plow. With a pendant deep as midnight north, we ask you be here now. Father, ere your inspiration holds together all that lives, as we breathe, our minds see clearly, leading us to love and give. Raging whirlwind, whispered breezes, violent gale, and gentle cloud. With a blade as sharp as morning east, we ask you be here now. Brother fire, great transformer, share the passion of the sun. In our hearts your warmth revives us, cooks our food and heats our homes. Flaming candle, blood within us, blazing desert, will to grow. With the wand directing power south, we ask you be here now. Sister water ever flowing, ocean, river, pond, and rain, drink we now and quench our thirst and cleanse us, we begin again. Mist and ice, a host of changes, all that courage will allow. With the cup, the holy chalice west, we ask you be here now. Be here now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Lovely, isn't it?
So Hilary is a computer specialist, as I said, and her work during the week is she helps people with different kind of limitations, children who have limitations, or maybe they're ADHD or they're dyslexic. They need some kind of support from the computers to gives them a new lease on life that can help them discern and read and move forward. And that's a lot of part of her work. But also one of her great passions since 1990, mid 1990s, is Green Spirit. And she's played a key role since then, as well as serving on Green Spirit's council at various times as chair, secretary, and currently as treasurer. She organizes events ranging from conferences and retreats to Zoom celebrations for the Celtic festivals, meditations, and discussion groups. She has lived for many years in London, UK. Hilary believes strongly in making cities greener places to be, so she supports the London Wildlife Trust, the Woodcraft Folk, sustainable architecture, growing vegetables, allotment gardening, and local green initiatives. She is an advisory teacher for ICT and inclusion. So when we met Hilary, she told us she was a spreadsheet kind of person, which is, I'm sure, one reason she stayed so much in the leadership, because you need people who can put it together like that. But we are so pleased to have you here, Hilary, and hope that you'll start us with some presentation so we can get to know Green Spirit.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here, and I bring you greetings from brothers and sisters in the UK. And I've got a presentation that gives you a little bit of the history of Green Spirit. So I'm going to share my screen again. Right. Right. Thank you so much for your welcome. It's lovely to be here, so to speak. Green Spirit is a small charity in the UK. We've got about 250 members, but a much larger mailing list. Green Spirit is a network of people who celebrate the human spirit in the context of our place in the natural world. And Green Spirit provides a spiritual home for environmentally concerned people of all faiths and none. We think this is a fairly radical vision, bringing together the rigor of science, creativity, artistic expression, the passion for social action, and wisdom of spiritual traditions of all ages. We're a body of people who believe that human life has both an ecological and a spiritual dimension, and we also celebrate the Earth's own evolutionary journey, including our sense of being the universe becoming conscious of itself. So Matthew Fox had spoken about the 4 paths of creation spirituality at St James's Church, Piccadilly, in May 1987. This is St James's Church. It's right in the centre of London. Of course, the title of Matthew Fox's original blessing captured the idea that motivated people so much, of humans being intrinsically whole and wholesome rather than fallen and in need of redemption. Being based right in the city, right in the centre of the city, in a beautiful building that people could pass through or visit when they were in London, gave creation spirituality a higher profile than would be expected for its membership size. At that time, it was reported in the Guardian newspaper, which is one of the UK's broadsheets, that the rector of the church was going to launch a religion of joy. So lots of people became aware of the new movement. A network began to be set up with contacts across the UK, but the centre and administrative hub was at St James's Church in Piccadilly. A small team generated some events, programmes and newsletters, and there were some valuable initiatives taken at that time. A project to launch a UK version of Original Blessing and publicised Matthew Fox's speaking tour around the country. There was a book called Visions of Creation, which was published based on a course about the creation tradition that was running at St James's at the time. A man called Alan Shepherd formed a mail order book service, and a lot of us are in Green Spirit today because of buying books from Alan. He was an absolute star until he died, regularly giving substantial donations towards the overhead costs of maintaining the office at the centre. They published a magazine which was called Interchange. This journal enabled dialogue between participants in the new movement and meant that events like rituals and liturgies could be shared. Interchange later became the Green Spirit magazine, which I'll tell you about in a little while, which remains a key means of connecting the movement in the UK. The number of regional contacts grew. It seemed important that creation spirituality would not just be a church-based phenomenon, because the spiritual leaders of the future were going to be artists and social catalysts rather than priests. The core activity was educational, and most of this took place at St James's, with many homegrown visionary speakers, as well as some high-profile American speakers like Fritjof Capra, Joanna Macy, Brian Swim, Neil Douglas Klotz, and others. There was an exploration at the time into other topics like the links between spirituality and campaigning and collective action. There was a day about politics with a soul, which examined inclusive spiritual political myths that were emerging. And other activities ranged from Native American medicine wheel teachings through explorations of Celtic spirituality and personal growth workshops. And one of the colleges of London University ran academic and introductory courses in creation spirituality, where they were teaching about the work of theologians and mystics like Thomas Aquinas, Julian of Norwich, Hildegard of Bingen, St. Francis of Assisi, and so on. During that period, St James's hosted one of its most inspiring events ever, a live enactment of the Misa Gaia with Paul Winter and consort during the 11 AM parish Eucharist. So St James's Church is still very broad-minded and celebrates creation spirituality with an annual creation-centred liturgy and monthly labyrinth walks. And the St James's community is now working on practical issues like climate change and very welcoming to visitors. So if you're in London, you must go and visit it. Learning about the Celtic tradition of the British Isles was a new experience for many who had only come across forms of Christianity from such as the Roman or nonconformist or evangelical Christianity, and ongoing exploration of Celtic spirituality seemed more meaningful for many within the UK than focusing on Native American spirituality. In 1991, there was a Festival of the Celtic Spirit at St James's, which was one of the most striking series of events from this period, with lots of visual and musical input, storytelling workshops and a liturgy. For the first time, pagan and Christian aspects of the Celtic tradition were celebrated together. Then educational work on the New Universe story was based on the insights of Brian Swim, Thomas Berry and others. There were a series of talks about the new science and the new paradigm, deep ecology, the unfolding cosmos. And Brian Swim's 12-part video provided Canticle to the Cosmos, provided source material for group study. The Green Spirituality Festival in the autumn of 1992 followed the Rio Earth Summit and introduced some leading green thinkers. Many found the spirituality of the Christian creation tradition healing in and of itself. Others benefited from workshops and groups that worked towards healing splits within the person, particularly scars formed by limited and wounding forms of religion. A focus on befriending the darkness and the wounded aspect of oneself prevented this from falling into the denial of the shadow. A more harmonious and less fractured sense of who human beings are began to be a felt reality. In 1995, the Association for Creation Spirituality was officially formed as a registered charity in the UK, and the title Green Spirit was adopted as the working title of the charity at the AGM in 1997, after a lot of discussion. Shortly after that, the administrative centre of the organisation moved away from St James's and became the responsibility of a paid administrator working part-time from home. And that's Ian, who's in the meeting. We have a council of usually 12 people, and we meet 3 times a year and at the AGM. We're all volunteers, except for Ian, who looks after membership, website, mailing lists, budgets, advertising for events, and lots of other things. We have subscriptions. We have different levels of subscriptions. There are concessionary and internet subscriber subscription levels. The AGM that I've just mentioned takes place once a year at the annual gathering, and it's a wonderful weekend meetup with folks from all over the UK and a speaker. This slide is from it's got bits of our website and invites people to look at our publications, our events, our local groups. We've got a Green Action Toolkit, and there are links to videos and podcasts and other resources. We've got lots of resources on here, for instance, articles about green spirituality and science, the ecocentric worldview, cosmology and evolution, green spirit lifestyle. And there are lots of ideas for starting local groups, as well as the sort of things you might do in a local group, including copies of ritual and so on. So first of all, I'm going to tell you about some of our publications. We have a very active publications group, and as well as the magazine, we publish some of our own homegrown titles, like the ebook series, which is here, which are free to members, and they're very low-cost paperback books. Then we've got some other very significant titles, which are these ones here, these 3. Green Spirit Path to New Consciousness has been described as the definitive guide to green spirituality and features contributions from 29 inspirational writers, including Matthew Fox, Brian Swim, Satish Kumar, and lots of others. And it was edited by Marion Van Eyck McCain, some of you might know. And one comment about this book is that green spirituality is the key to a new 21st century consciousness. And this book is the most comprehensive ever written on the subject. The Meditations of Thomas Berry is by another of our members, selected and arranged by June Raymond. And the Universe Story in Science and Myth is by members as well. This is just to show you some of the headings inside the Green Spirit Path to New Consciousness. As you can see, it covers our relationship with Gaia, deep ecology, eco-psychology, spiritual paths, activism, greening our culture, for instance, law, agriculture, education, health, and so on. So it's a great book to find out about Green Spirit. I mentioned Alan Shepard earlier. He used to have a fantastic bookstall that he took all over the country to study days and festivals. And many people joined Green Spirit because of him and his books. Alan died a few years ago and the book world was changing. So many people bought stuff online. So we don't have a bookstore now, but we have many book reviews on our website. And we've got something called Books in a Suitcase, which is a suitcase full of the most relevant books on green spirituality, which can be sent by courier to events that members run around the country. And Ian looks after that and keeps it up to date. The Green Spirit magazine comes out twice a year. It's free for members and it's published in print and in electronic form. It's published in the spring and the summer, and everyone subscribing is also sent a calendar, a Green Spirit calendar, which is the next slide I'll show you. Each issue includes essential topics connected with earth-based spirituality. The current magazine has good news as opposed to bad, art, poetry, articles about eco-anxiety in children, an article about the Quakers and Green Spirit, a vegan recipe, ideas from the Green Action Toolkit, and book reviews, as well as articles on all sorts of things. And in this one there's an article about eco-despair and beyond resilience. So the magazines are really highly thought of and valued. This is a calendar. We've got some excellent photographers in Green Spirit and a beautiful earth to take photos of. So the calendar's got inspirational photographs and quotes for each month. And everybody gets a copy, all the members get a copy of that in the autumn, beginning of the winter. So we have events as well, and this is our national events take place in different venues. We always try to make sure that they can be accessed by public transport, and but nice enough to go for a walk. And this place here is Holland House, and the last time we were there, Mary Reynolds Thompson, as some of you will know, came to speak to us and ran workshops. And this place is in Worcestershire, not far from Shakespeare's birthplace. Our annual gathering gives us food for thought and challenges us with various green issues. We usually have welcoming rituals and a speaker, devotional activities, workshops, creative activities, and a time for reflection about what we're taking away from the gathering. The picture here is from a gathering that took place at Samhain in the autumn. So we created a wall of the ancestors, personal ancestors and famous ancestors. And this place at the bottom where the dragon's coming out the wall is another place that we go for our annual gathering. That's near Glastonbury, where there's a Glastonbury tour and the Chalice Well. We're going to go there next May, in fact, unless there are still COVID restrictions. As well as our annual gathering over the years, we've had other conferences like the Universe Story event, celebrations of Thomas Berry's life, And as well as guests like Mary Reynolds Thompson, we've had David Abrahams, Brian Swim, Vandana Shiva, John Seed, and we've invited UK-based scientists, theologians, activists, architects, druids, academics, authors, ritual makers, and we've had conferences about all sorts of things like biomimicry, spiritual activism, sustainable cities, Gaia theory, etc. Arnie Ness said, deep experiences are often what gets people started on the path towards deep ecological wisdom and commitment. And I saw back in the 15, 20 years ago, I saw how thrilled and delighted kids from the city were when we took them out to climb hills and cross streams. And so that inspired us to start having a walking break regularly. We've been having a walking retreat for the last 15 years. And it started with the intention of giving time and space for people to spend walking the earth with reverence and being in nature, stopping to wonder and deepen our relationships with the earth. We always stay in somewhere inexpensive, like a youth hostel. Yes, we do sleep in dormitories. We usually go walking for 2 or 3 days, and our walks are interrupted every now and again by some silence or some readings. We try and stay together as much as possible for those moments, but we do organise our walks now for striders, strollers and stragglers, because we're all walking at different speeds. And so we have an evening of welcome and introduction and creative activities arising from our walks. One of our welcoming rituals was when we introduced ourselves and something other than human from the area that we were visiting. We also have a wild week in Wales, which takes place in a beautiful place called Cae Mabon in Snowdonia, owned by a friend who's a storyteller. And some of you may have been there for workshops if you've been to the UK. There's a tumbling river that runs down the side of the mountain into Lake Paddan, and smoke curls up from the top of the roundhouse. We sleep in these different structures, and there's a labyrinth and a tree house and a variety of sculptures on site. We shower in water from the river, although it is put through a boiler, so it's not freezing. We use compost loos and generally commune with the elements. There's a heron that always visits the pool in the stream, and dragonflies flit around our heads, and bats as well under the Milky Way. There's nothing quite like an early morning swim in the lake with the mountains in the distance and then coming back to a hot tub. This is another slide of Cae Mabon. It gives us an opportunity to commune together as a group with the elements. So we live in community for a week, usually meeting in circle in the mornings after some yoga or body prayer or meditation. We plan our day doing workshops, small groups, craft activities, swimming in the lake, cooking the dinner, sitting around the fire in the roundhouse, singing and drumming, storytelling. And we always prepare a ritual for the penultimate day that springs from our experiences during the week, often on a certain theme, like the elements or thresholds or something like that. If we have children that come to our events, we do try and accommodate them with children's activities. We don't actually get children very often, but we do sometimes. This bottom activity here was organised. It was a fun day. It was a fun palace, a day event organised by one of our members, and we were there, and we got children drawing the unfolding universe story. And this is a bunch of children making miniature gardens, and this young man here is interviewing a tree. So many of us are vegetarian or vegans. Many of us recycle as much as we can, and we compost scraps, use eco-friendly laundry products, sign petitions against pesticides that are killing bees. Most of us know we can't use aeroplanes, drive gas-guzzling cars. And many of us are involved in speaking up for the planet, ourselves and all our neighbours, human and non-human. We go to climate change marches, and some folks are part of transition towns. I don't know if you have those in the US, transition movements, or Extinction Rebellion. And we have to think globally and act locally. So we have quite a lot of local groups around the country. Ours is in East London, is one of several. Most of the groups celebrate the turning of the lovely earth through the seasons, but there are other activities that groups do. I can talk about our group more. We remember the ancestors at Samhain, celebrate the harvest in the autumn and the new life in the spring. In one of our rituals, we usually honour the directions and the elements and the other than human world represented by those directions. In our group, we often get more people for the solstices, and people like to come to Samhain to remember their loved ones that have died. And we have, I've got a small garden, we've got a bonfire in the garden. And this is, Ikebana is the Japanese art of arranging flowers meditatively. So we quite often do that in the spring. Some groups meet to read books or discuss books or watch a video. Some have different flavors, slightly different flavors to their activities. There are some more Unitarian groups and some Celtic groups and shamanic groups. We blend devotional activities with creative ones, do some artwork and sometimes some craft. We've been camping in the forest for the solstice. In East London, we also have a silver tent group, which obviously none of these actual meetings are happening at the moment. It's all happening on Zoom. But we haven't met as a silver tent group since COVID. But until then, we were meeting regularly. Some of us older women in East London, we meet sort of roughly monthly. We're mostly over 55 and meet to offer each other support and spiritual companionship, and to work together to encourage and nurture the younger people in our lives on their spiritual journeys. Some of us meet regularly for meditation, and we try and take place in events that are organised, that are worldwide. This was a harvest altar. And this is my final slide, really. This is just to say that the current circumstances haven't stopped us meeting. And though we can't share the creative activities, the singing, the dancing and the food together as we usually do, Zoom has allowed us to meet together in a new Green Spirit way. We've continued to celebrate the seasons. We've got a group called Wisdom Keepers, where we've considered such things as re-enchanting life, envisioning the future, balancing masculine and feminine. And this mind map here was, we created this after talking about envisioning the future. Ian's done some talks on green spirituality. Our resident herbalist, Richard, who's on the call as well, has done some talks on green health and coronavirus. We've had a vegan dinner party. And we are meeting online to do some meditations. And I think that perhaps we will carry on using Zoom as well as meeting in person, because it's been so fantastic to be able to meet together with people from all over the UK and from Europe and the US. I think we may well go on doing it. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and that's my presentation.
Oh. Thank you, Hilary. What a creative full, rich life you all have created together for yourselves. That is wonderful. My first question is not the one I said I was going to ask, which is, to what do you prescribe the reason that this has flourished so much in just 30 years? What do you think the key piece of your work together has kept it going and growing?
I think that this is what people need in our time, a connection with the earth, and that's I think it will go on growing, and I think it will grow in lots of other places as well. But you know, when people come along to Green Spirit, but we're just one expression of this new consciousness. This is it speaks to people's hearts. So I think I've known people that have come along to some of our meetings and been very touched and moved by the connection to the living world and to the natural world. I think also there's a deep sense of a spiritual journey that we all have, and I think that speaks to people's hearts as well. We have got so many different ways of expressing our spirituality, and we've got a really, really good publications team, and some of the magazines are fantastic, and the publications, the books that are published are wonderful. We've got a good Facebook presence and other social media. So it's sort of out there. And I think some of the events are very welcoming as well. We try and keep the costs down as much as we can for events to allow people to come.
Now, what would you say in your life before you got involved in Green Spirit? What prepared you to recognize the value and the importance of what Green Spirit does?
I was a Christian. I was a charismatic, born again, praise the Lord Christian when I was 15, from 15 to about 30. And I made all my major life decisions in that time, like getting married young and having lots of kids and things. There was a big rift in the house church I belonged to, and we left, and it started me on probably a slightly more mature journey, exploring spirituality. And when I found creation spirituality, well, I used to go to St. James's Church because they had in London, because they had meetings that it was a series of meetings called Alternatives, with lots of alternative expressions of spirituality, from Mongolian overtone chanting to Buddhism, and all sorts, healing and so on. But that's where I found out about creation spirituality, because they were based there. I found a leaflet, I saw their magazine, and I am lucky because I have always loved nature. I've always loved things like seeing raindrops on roses, and this just spoke to me. The love of the earth that Green Spirits have, and that the honouring of the natural world, and that sense of interconnection, the fact that we are all interconnected, and the incredible diversity in the natural world. So in fact, that wasn't the very first thing. Was healing my own wounds after coming out of the church. So that's what first attracted me to creation spirituality, because I had felt that the feminine had been denied, and so that was one of the very first things that impressed me. but then we just spending time in the natural world with groups of green spirit people was it really called to my heart. It filled the space that I had there.
Thank you. So you've played several leadership roles, one after the other, and which one is most satisfying to you?
Well, yes, I have been on the council and done different things. And I have enjoyed all of them, actually. Secretary, chair, treasurer, vice chair. I know this is a bit odd, but I actually quite like being the treasurer.
I'm sure they don't think it's odd.
I mean,
for a treasurer.
I'm quite good with numbers and accounts. I'm not brilliant at how to invest any money and, you know, that sort of thing. But there are people on the council who know about that sort of thing, and we do work together. That's the really nice thing about being on the council, because the council's full of people with amazing skills and creative, lovely people. And so if I need to decide whether or not to put this little sum of money into an investment account, somebody would give advice. But I like doing the books. I also do a bit of, I help with the organisation of events and the walking retreats and the conferences. So I find and liaise with different venues, help to organise a speaker and plan workshops. And I'm quite good at meeting and greeting, so I'm quite good at being welcoming when folks arrive at venues. I like people, really, and many people are very generous with their creative talents, running workshops, playing music, teaching dances, leading meditation. So it's never difficult to do that sort of thing.
And the books, all the writing that you do, all the publishing you do, is that a lot of volunteer work? Is that Ian staying up late at night, or how do you produce such a large amount of beautiful material?
Yeah, well, I'm not part of the publications team, but Steve is on this call and he's part of the publications team, and so is Ian. And I mean, it is brilliant. Yes, they are all volunteers, and I think they do an absolutely brilliant job.
Obviously, beautiful. Yeah, it's really
and
beautiful.
Steve's a designer and makes them look absolutely beautiful. So
the designer. So we are Creation Spirituality Communities. I'm not on the board anymore, but I know that one of the something that they've been working on so much is trying to build up small groups. And I see Carol Kilby is on here now. I know she's working on one on her own themes of deep time, but also there's another Canadian group that is established. So we're interested in what your community does together. You bring them together. Do you have a ritual? Do you always start with a dance, and then do you use the 4 paths? I mean, what's your cohesion? What makes it work?
So I think what makes it work is it really helps to have food, actually. So we usually have an evening meeting and we usually have a meal together before we do anything. And it's either shared, so people bring stuff to share, or it's a simple meal that can be potatoes in their jackets or something that can be done in the oven quickly. So simple food together, that's lovely. And then I think making sure that everybody has a voice if they want to, and so we quite often pass around a talking stick. We always start with some sort of introduction. We often call the directions. We've got a really nice book that some Green Spirit members made of a ritual source book, and they've written a different calling of the directions for each of the Celtic festivals. So we can use that and adapt the words as necessary. I'm lucky, I've got a little fire in the garden, so if we can get outside, we do. And for instance, it's lovely sitting out there in the middle of winter round the fire, talking about what we like about the winter. We did used to meet in a church hall. This was ages and ages ago in the 90s, but actually if you can meet in a home, I think it could sometimes be a bit more comfortable. And I'm lucky enough to have a garden room that takes about 15 people. So we always invite readings and stories and songs from other people. So people are very welcome to bring stuff. That seems to be popular. People always bring something. When we're doing it on Zoom, I usually create a PowerPoint with an introduction and calling of the directions. And I usually split the introduction up into 2 parts, so it's a bit like a conversation. And then I can ask people to read the introduction and to call the directions, so people are taking part. And I mean, the most important thing is that that people love the earth, and people love to come and celebrate and feel connected to the earth. I mean, we did a meditation last weekend for Imbolc, which was about being a seed in the earth and feeling the sun warming the earth and a trickle of rain, and feeling that need to reach up towards the sun, up out of the earth. And we lit candles, everybody spoke, everybody lit a candle and talked about their projects and their intentions for the spring. So I think it's, encouraging participation and probably hospitality and being earth-centered.
Thank you. I know you asked us, you're a little bit worried about coming and to talk to us because you thought maybe we might be too churchy. And that was one of the issues that you all went into changing your name, right? It was Creation-Centered Spirituality, and you changed it to Green Spirit. And are there other issues that you have that have come up that you all have together, kind of like sawed on together for a little bit before you came up with direction? Tell us about the landscape of your thought processes.
Yeah, there was lots of discussion before we changed our name to Green Spirit. And I think most people felt that they did want to change the name, but it took us a long while to decide on a name. But there wasn't real contention, I don't think, over it. It was just took us a long time to settle on something. And one of the reasons was that people felt that one or two people thought that creation spirituality linked us with creationists and felt a bit uncomfortable about it.
Yeah, that's familiar.
The other things we've had an awful lot of debate about were things like new leaflets. Whenever there's a new leaflet or a new publication or the wording on the website, there's quite a lot of conversation. And it's usually a conversation about who we are and what's true for us now. Have we left our roots sufficiently to exclude them from printed material? Are they still important? That sort of thing. And there isn't a lot of contention. We sometimes have a bit of a debate over how much to charge for events. Some people say we should make things free. so that anyone can come, and others say we must value ourselves and make sure we charge the right price for what we're offering. So, you know, there's that sort of, those sort of things that happen. I suppose the only thing that's come up recently is there are new groups springing up, new Green Spirit groups, and you know, sometimes they sound a little bit new agey, and we think, is this okay? So sort of feeling our way through.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, keeping the integrity as you grow is
yeah. But we are quite small, so it's not, you know, it's not, that sort of thing isn't an issue really.
Mm-hmm. An opportunity to learn.
Yeah.
Each. Yeah. Well, wow. Well, thank you. You have given us so much in the music, and we weren't done yet. But thank you for the presentation and the interview. I'm really pleased to hear about what's going on, and we know across the pond, as they say. We don't have Penny. We only have one question that I can tell. Let's see. From Carol Kilby that I can see that we have on the chats. So it's time now for you all to move into your own questions that might have been formulating while you've been listening, and Penny is going to lead you in that section.
Thank you. And I wondered if Stephen and Ian might add their perspective before we move into the group questioning. If they're up for it, or would want to just add a sentence, paragraph or two about their experience. Yeah, Ian, please.
Thank you. Hilary's wonderful presentation. I just want to pick up on the question, what draws people to Green Spirit? And I think there's a real hunger for meaning in our world as we become very materialist. And what we're kind of a beacon of that kind of earth connection. And it's not so much, you know, we do the 4 directions or we do the creation spirituality 4 paths or whatever. Those are kind of little hooks. It's more of a kind of a general feeling of wanting to connect in a meaningful way. And then we are welcoming and provide those rituals to help deepen people. And that's certainly very true for me. I have a very strong need for meaning making in my life. Like Hilary, I had a Christian background and had to move away from that because I didn't feel it was spiritual in some ways. But with this, it's very, very universalist and open-hearted. The question about moving away from creation spirituality to Green Spirit was in part to become a very universalist with the influence of Thomas Berry and Brian Swim, universe story in the sense of whether you're Buddhist or Jew or Christian or agnostic or atheist even, you know, you're welcome. So it's this open-heartedness, which I think is, for me, a very deep spiritual principle, which is actually reflected in Quakerism and Unitarianism, where we actually have a lot of natural overlap. So that was my answer.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah. Stephen, would you add anything?
Yes, some overlaps with Ian. Yes, wonderful work, Hilary, well done. And yes, my understanding was that, as Ian has sort of said, some people have come to Green Spirit more through Thomas Berry, Brian Swim, rather than Matthew Fox. It's not that they're in conflict with one another, obviously, but you know, they're not so much creation spirituality, but more lovers of the earth, that kind of thing, and more into the universe story and so on, which is Swim's and Berry's prime perspective, what they're particularly known for. But also, I think, you know, as lovely and inclusive as Matthew Fox has been, interestingly, he's what drove me to Green Spirit. But it often, from people perhaps who don't know so much about Fox, they see him, certainly in England, because he is a Christian priest, but you know, they associate it more with the Christian movement. And so Green Spirit kind of sort of showed it was more inclusive, which, as I say, Matthew Fox would probably sort of say, well, I am, you know, what you're on about. But it was just the image, I think, really, more than anything, you know. And, you know, I mean, we have people who probably you have the same in America, who have kind of, they got some baggage with Christianity and so on. And so it was a way of saying, well, look, you know, that doesn't matter. You know, if you've got some kind of nature perspective, you know, which you feel kind of in line with what we're about, then you're more than welcome. And, you know, work out your baggage as you go along the way. You know, that's your journey, you know, in a way. And so, yeah, you know, one of my best friends who's passed was a spiritualist medium, but he's, you know, he became a member of Green Spirit because he was always, he'd had actually been a Benedictine monk in his youth, but he'd always had and was known for having a very strong sort of nature spirituality to his teachings and so on. So yeah, you know, and if it was seen as a very Christian movement, he might have got into trouble with organizations he was involved in, who, not so much him, but the organizations he was involved in, certainly have a lot of baggage about Christianity and so on. So yeah, it just left the door open a bit more for us, is my perspective and my take. I wasn't there when that change in name was happening, but I could understand. Certainly when I joined, I was a bit disappointed because I came along because of Creation Spirituality and Matthew Fox, and thinking, oh, you changed the name. But in hindsight, I think it was a wise move.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And is anyone else on the call from Green Spirit that would want to add their perspective?
Richard's from Green Spirit.
Richard, would you care to add anything? And you're still on, yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Penny. Thank you, everyone. It's to share this time with you all. So much comes to mind that I'm just slowing my mind down a little. One of the things I find and was drawn to Green Spirit was the connection, to experience in community the awe and the wonder, being struck by the beauty of it, and to share that. And in the sharing, it is amplified. There's another characteristic when I found myself coming into Green Spirit, and I've observed in others, is seeking purpose and meaning in their lives. And the doorway is the natural world. People naturally gravitating with the beauty of the natural world and that can be there within, and joining with other people. And in that way, exploring consciousness, whether it be their personal consciousness, including their I consciousness, social community consciousness, the consciousness of a group, of a culture, that consciousness which is planetary or beyond. And this is a great exploration, I think, for many Green Spirit members, is to become conscious of the consciousness in all. So to become conscious of the consciousness, to be aware of the awareness. And that takes us into something beyond ourself, a transpersonal in our journeys. It's the we that is wiser than the me. But the gateway, I think, for people that are drawn, we're drawn to Green Spirit by the earth and the beauty therein. But there's also a push, we're push me, pull yous. Push is this feeling that the compass has been lost in much of our culture and our world perspective. There's the center will not hold. There is a gap which is longing to be filled. It is spiritual. It is to have that embodied. For me, that's key. To be embodied with the spirit in relationship, and the relationship that takes me beyond the personal and the me is the engagement with the earth. This is both liberating and it preserves my sanity from what seems to be so often the craziness in the world around us, the crises that we are facing, the meta crisis, one crisis after another, which pushes us into confusion. We need to find the we that is wiser than the me more than ever. Where I've been talking quite a lot there, so I'll leave it there. Thank you, Penny.
Well, thank you for slowing down your mind to express it so exquisitely. I hear the mystic and the seeking for union with the mystical. Thank you so much. Well, as we, okay, so how is your invitation into the groups extended is Carol Kilby's question to Hilary. And there is an answer. It's open to anyone. But would you say more about that? Do you continue to grow? Is that part of what's going on, Hilary?
Yeah. We've got a local social network called Nextdoor, which I think started in the US, so you've probably got it too.
Yeah.
So we use that, and we use Facebook and word of mouth. And we do find that when we have national events, people often say, have you got a local group near me? Is there a local group? So people who come to the national events want to come to local groups. Obviously, we haven't got groups all over the country, but seem to be springing up. There's a steady, small growth. And we have people bringing friends along. So there's usually a core of people that are there all the time, but then other people come along and sometimes stay.
So it feels like a very organic process. You don't sit and strategize growing, it just grows of its own.
Yeah, we don't think about it that much. I think there's a bit of an overlap with other groups as well. So for instance, you might have a red tent group and a silver tent group, and there's people that come to one but not the other, or there's people that come to both, and there's it's the overlap sometimes helps to grow.
Wow. Carol, did that get your question, or do you have a follow-up? You good?
Yeah, you don't, Gary, you're on mute. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm good, Gail. Thanks. And Penny, that it twigged, ideas in terms of what's around here, and ideas that I hadn't thought of in terms of what to do. Silly, why we don't think of them. So lovely to hear from you, Hilary, and Green Spirit. And I find the conversation about the naming important and challenging, to let go the identifiers and to go to something so universal. Thank you.
Wow. And Carol just put out a wonderful book called Evolutionary Dancer that is all about ritual based on the universe story. And, it makes me wonder, how do we cross-pollinate across the pond with great material that is being birthed, these days. So it's worth a ponder for all of us. Other questions, and again, raise your hand or however you want to make yourself known that you have a question or comment you'd like to add. And if there's a pause in I think, Hilary, you used the word social patternist. Did I hear that correctly in your talk?
Did I say social activist? Is that?
Did you say activist or patternist?
No,
Activist.
I didn't say what you said.
Okay, because I was really catching on to that, and I thought, wow, what an interesting concept.
Yeah.
Do you, like in our culture, what's happening the closest, especially in my area, because we have several very strong pagan communities. What happens with that interaction? Are you finding a different group is attracted, or how does that work in England?
We quite often have members of pagan groups who are they see on Facebook that we've got a Beltane celebration or something. So we do have people join us from pagan groups sometimes, especially during this time of Zoom, this COVID time. So we've had 1 or 2 people join us from pagan groups. But pagan groups, I mean, people that are it's to do with the countryside, isn't it? Pagan people want to honor what is in the countryside and nature and Mother Earth. So obviously there's a link between us. Ian, you're champing at the bit to say something.
I was. We certainly do have that, but I think one of the biggest crossovers we actually have are with Quakers and Unitarians. And what that says to me is there's a search for meaning making in the spiritual realm. And it's this kind of, I'll just be honest, kind of thinking orientated universalist type of person we probably overlap with quite well. We do overlap obviously with pagans and but that's a key thing I've noticed over the years. In terms of growth, we are growing slowly. The analogy I always use is a glacier. It'd be lovely to say, oh, it's taking off. It's not, but it's small. But over the 20 years I've been involved, it's very slow, but it's been very tangible. People are coming into these days with a much more spiritual journey experience. So these days they've done a bit of yoga. They've read a few of the kind of alternative books. They've had a crisis that they've had to deal with, etc., and done some personal development. Whereas when we were 20 years ago, we were more kind of ex-church, people who are reacting away, the Matthew Fox effect of the church isn't meeting my needs and I need to refine my spirituality. So that's been a slow change over the 20 years.
Wow, fascinating. Other comments or questions from those listening? Just raise your hand if, let's see. Judy, did you? Oh, Michelle. And Michelle.
Just some thoughts. I mean, I live on Cape Cod in Massachusetts, and like I think where I found other people that love nature would be like environmental groups, like with other activists, like 350, things like that. And as we have a group now called the Faith Communities Environmental Network, which is trying to identify people in different church groups to get together. And they recently did a survey, and one of the things that came out was how alone those people in the churches felt, that they felt a real call to honor the earth, but that sure wasn't how the whole congregation felt. And I think it's, when you are like trying to be out there being an activist, just how depressing it is. I mean, the earth is in such a bad state that you just need as much support as you can get. So it's like, how do you support the activist when things aren't like that? When I wouldn't, there's not places like that or groups like that where I am, is what I would say. So even though I live on the East Coast, and I think people are all over, the creation spirituality does feed me in a certain way.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Other thoughts? And I don't know that I'm on a smaller screen, so I'm not sure I'm seeing everyone. That's something coming in.
Oh, Judy put her hand up.
Oh, great, Judy. Sorry.
Well, I wasn't going to really get into this, but it seems to have come open already. I love your name, and as the Creation Spirituality Community Board member, we've looked at your website a number of times, and a number of people, gosh, people that have attended the Parliament of World Religion for our booths and various planners and various gatherings, various settings I've been in, have discussed the language and the name in particular, and certainly wanting to be clear that we are welcoming truly an spiritual, interfaith, multidisciplinary, not just Christian expression. And yet, wow, the language of creation spirituality, that very name can be so off-putting because the confusion with creationism. So I just put it forth in this group, you people who are part of this side of the pond in Canada and the US. This is a conversation that we need to continue to have and maybe even broaden the conversation. At the same time, celebrating the legacy of creation spirituality. So it's an interesting dance to do.
Well, I loved how they're doing their Samhain celebration with the ancestors, and wouldn't that be a place to celebrate lineage?
Mm-hmm.
Even if we were to go in a different direction, name-wise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Huh.
They do have, they have a creation spirituality worship experience that happens on Sunday nights at various, 6, 7, 8, 2 o'clock, wherever you are. And that's one way of bringing a group together. And I think that's going very well.
Yes, I'm on that team, and a number of people on this call are also participating in that. Barbara and Margaret and Michelle and Carol, you've joined us some. Mel, Nathan, definitely a part of it. At any rate, yeah.
So if any of you want to be on the mailing list if you aren't, you probably got this because you are on the mailing list, but just in case you aren't, then please, you could just send a reply to what you got as the announcement, and that'll come to me, and I'll collect those and put them in for you if you like me to do that. Also for the experience, I think you go onto their website, you can do that. And I'd like to know if there's anybody, Hilary, how you would, Ian would maybe like to have us become part of your website. How do we get on your mailing list so we can keep ourselves connected? Do we go to your website? Is that it?
Yes, so it's the newsletter. If you just want to get our newsletter, then you can sign up for free there. That's the easiest way. You can join us if you want, but that's probably the newsletter's the first thing. Yeah.
The other thing is that we've got a Green Spirit Facebook page for members, but we've also got a Green Spirit page that is outward looking for anybody, so you don't have to be a member. But we put anything that's open, any Green Spirit events that are open to people that aren't members is on there, and we tend to make most of our events open to anybody. There's hardly anything that's just for members.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to come along to the spring equinox celebration, you'd be very welcome.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I guess I had one question of whether you ever took on a particular spiritual and also political issue together as a group, or is it in the pockets? The different pockets will stand up and march together. Have you ever done one big issue?
I don't think, no, I don't think so. I don't think we've No, a lot of people are involved in climate change and things like transition town movements and so on. So I think, you know, that's our main thrust of political action. Don't you think, Ian?
I think broadly the answer is that, yes. There was one book we did, well, in fact I did, about called the Rising Water Project, which was about climate change, which asked people who've been flooded to give their experience, and people who downshifted and therefore were saving carbon emissions, to get real stories. So we've got a book, for instance, and we have a practical action part, but we haven't done one theme on a political issue. On a spiritual issue, you know, we've had speakers who've gone to a particular theme. So we've probably done that, yeah.
And then one more pressing question about your walks. Do you, during your walks, and I know that the UK walks a little differently than Americans walk. There is the, you know, the appreciation of the bird sound, and we do it a way, but there is something, my uncle used to walk the moors for 10 hours a day, and he'd be gone and he'd be happy as he could be when he got home. Do you do anything structured during your walks, or is it like my uncle would wander the moors for 8 hours, but you do it as a group?
Yeah, we sometimes walk in silence, but we usually agree as a group when that's going to be. We might spend most of the time chatting, but then agree that we'll spend an hour walking in silence. And people bring along reflections, poetry, prose, or a song they might want to sing, and we'll stop. So you might get to a particular headland and somebody will say, can we stop here and just look at it? And so it is a spiritual experience. It's like a pilgrimage. It's lovely to walk along and chat, but there is definitely a sense of appreciating the earth and sharing that experience with the earth as well as with each other. It's not usually formal, it's more informal and organic.
Wow. Well, I can't thank you enough for this afternoon's offering and your cohorts that chimed in with their beautiful words and efforts. And I think you've given us an awful lot to think about here. And I certainly hope we can do this cross-fertilization a bit more in some capacity, because there's so much goodness to share. Before I read the closing poem, I wondered if there was any unfinished words in your heart that want to be said. Let's see, we've got, thank you so much. This is Ian. It's been great to connect and have a sense of where you're at. Carol, thank you, Ian, Stephen, Richard, and Hilary. So, and Judy, thanks you as well, Green Spirit. I mean, we are kindred souls, are we not? From wherever we are, whether it's experiencing the Arctic frost in Wisconsin to the balmy seaside of San Diego. All right. Well, I'll close with one of the Green Spirit poems that were shared by Patrick Huddle. I am. So letting your breath just take in kin from another side of the world. We are kin. I am a child of the universe, inheritor of first unfolding, fruit of dinosaur stars. I'm a child of earth, offspring of the great mother, Gaia, aware of herself. I am a child of the sea, spin-off from first chemistry, land-based dolphin. I am a child of air, being that breathes and sings and plays in the atmosphere. I am a child of fire, issue of first combustion, furnace of cells and joys. I am a child of God, creature of mysteries, heir of original grace. Thank you so much, all. What a
Thank you
blessing.
very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Till
you.
another time.
Thank you. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you, Hilary, so much. Thank you. Thank you all. And the board members here from CSC as well. Thank you for
Thank you.
being
Thank you for your
with us.
friendship.
Thank you.
May
Thank
it
you.
continue.
You. Bye.
Yes.
Yeah, may it
Indeed.
continue.
Yeah.
Hilary, you make me want to run home, but I won't. Can't.
Oh, thanks, Margaret.
Thank you, dear. Thank you, Gail and Penny.
Yes, thank you so
thank
much.
you, Gail and Penny.
I'm ready to see you, Judy.
See you later.
See you all.
Bye.
Thank you.
And
I'll
thank-
get off. Thanks, Gail.
Okay, thank you, Hilary,
Bye. Bye.
so much. It's been a blessing. Oh, just me. You there, Penny? No? Okay, well, yeah, I'm gonna end it then.